What's up, my Makokos, Raid Pros, and Bonk Bros? Defender here, and welcome back to another video. I hope you're all doing well today. We have a big update tomorrow, and I just wanted to go. See you later, Iggy. Just wanted to go through the all the roles that you can get. Oh, okay. Must be some ghosts in the house. Come here. So what I wanted to do was go through all of the different bracelet roles that we can get and essentially just apply them to a tier list. Now, bear in mind this is just my immediate thoughts on them. The translations are taken from Saint Tone and also from the Russian version client as well, where some of the terms are different. Hello, Iggy. You're back now. Come on in. So they might change in translation, but the fundamentals of what those perks do aren't going to change. So we can go off of the numbers and how they work, and basically give you an idea of what's really valuable to get on a roll, and what you can basically scrap or put to the side, or not even waste your silver on rolling, right? Because silver is such a finite resource that we don't want to waste it on rolls that don't even need to be attempted. There's so much RNG already involved that we're probably going to run out of silver doing everything. So, but before we get into today's video, you guys know the drill with YouTube. If you like the video and you appreciate the content, please consider dropping me a subscribe. Let me know down in the comments down below if there's any ways that I can improve the video, or if I've got something wrong maybe, or maybe you just want to share your opinions on the matter. I always appreciate hearing from you guys. Your feedback is incredible. I'm taking on board everything you guys are saying, and I try and communicate with you guys as much as possible in the comments down below. And so yeah, if you like the content, please consider doing any of those. I'd really appreciate your support. We're going to keep growing as a community, and I want to keep delivering amazing content to you guys. But anyway, let's get straight into the video. Enjoy. With that being said, let's look at the list of all the different roles we can get from the bracelet, and it's broken up into a few different categories, right? So we have your stats, and then we have in the stats we have your default stats that you can get, and that means like your health and your main stat. Now your main stat might be strength if you're a warrior or a martial artist. It might be dexterity if you're a gunner or an assassin, or you might be intelligence if you're a mage. And those stats they roll quite high because we have a lot of that stat that converts into attack power, and it's never a bad thing to have any more of that. And then we have the combat traits. Now the combat traits are broken up into the 6 that you know already in game. So you're probably only used to running 3 of them. We call those the Holy Trinity, and that's what the Koreans have also referred to it as, and that is crit, specialization, and swiftness. Now these are the 3 that you run on a day-to-day basis for all content. They're the safest thing to invest in because the other 3 are very niche, and they're only really used in certain very specific builds, whether you're looking to do like high stagger burst damage in hell modes, or if you're building for PvP, or maybe you're building for something else specific, like anti-crowd control for Vikers, so that you can do the mechanics and not have to worry about dying. There's a few different meme builds and there's budget builds, but essentially the Holy Trinity of the 3 other ones that we want to talk about, and the rest of them, they don't really matter. And then we move on to the special effects. Now the special effects, there's a huge list of them, and I want to make sure that everyone understands that it's broken up into 2 different lists. Okay, so the first list is ones that you can get to drop on the bracelet immediately on the locked rolls. Okay, so they're the fixed identified rolls that you can get. And you can see those beforehand. They can also happen when you roll them afterwards in the unidentified ones. And then we have the more elusive ones, the kind of the premium ones, if you will. These ones only happen when you roll them, and they cannot appear on a bracelet when it drops. These are the highly desirable ones, and these are the ones that are really going to be the make or break in the tier list that we're going to go through. Okay, so there's quite a few of them. Okay, so we have a tier list. We're just going to use a bunch of icons that we pulled from the OnStove site for the effects, the perks of the special effects and the stats, because I don't have any in-game footage of the icons, so I'm just going to talk about which one they are when I use them, and attribute it to that effect. And I'll put a little picture up in the top left of the screen so that you guys can see just which one that is when we're talking about it, so you can follow along. Just a screenshot of the whole tier list might not make sense, so we'll try and make sense of it as we're going along beforehand. So let's start off with Vitality, and Vitality here, we're just going to use the heart icon that we pulled from, I think, Zelda, it was probably. And Vitality, for either a support or a DPS, it's going to be C tier, right? So you might have a function for a support that uses it, but generally speaking, you don't really care about Vitality or Endurance at all. In fact, no, D tier is everything that's useless. Let's leave it at C tier. And then we move on to main stat. So main stat is like your strength or your dexterity or your intelligence, and that's decent. It holds up in terms of like a budget or like an okay settle kind of role, depending on the class. Some classes make better use of it than others, but generally speaking, it's definitely not S tier. The judgment icon as the main stat, and main stat we're going to put it in A because it does have some role potential as we go along. But then again, some classes don't use it so much, and some really rely on it more than others. But definitely not an S tier. All right, so let's go into the 6 combat trait stats that we're talking about. Sorry if you can hear Iggy, he's sitting on my lap at the moment, aren't you, Bubba? Okay. Yeah, good boy. You might be able to see his little ears popping up on screen. So let's start with the Holy Trinity, which is crit, specialization, and swiftness. Now these 3 are undoubtedly S tier, and you should be looking for these when you're looking for a drop. Specifically, looking for a drop with these rolls is preferable because the perks when you're rolling are much bigger. The pool to pull your perks from is much bigger, and these can roll on the drops, whereas other stuff can't. So you need to find these as quick as possible on a bracelet, because that way you don't have to rely on trying to get luck with the rolls. Okay, so those 3 are absolutely S tier. Now let's get through to endurance, expertise, and domination. Endurance, we could say support might have a role for it, but generally speaking, it's not useful. It's not useful at all. We'll put it in C just because you could argue that a support might be okay with it, and it does have a role in GVG, PvP for certain classes like Destroyer, Gun Lancer, etc. Domination, though, not at all, and expertise, not at all. Okay, so I'm not interested in either of those 2. You might be able to build a niche build around them in PvP or in certain raids or guardians if you're looking to flex a big number on stagger, but generally speaking, we don't care for either of those, and you shouldn't look for them. No real value. Okay, and then let's move on to max health. So max health, I would say, not useful at all, really. You might be able to argue that support could use it for some of their stuff, so maybe we'll put it in the support category under S, but generally speaking, it's garbage for most people. And that's the same for max mana as well. There's no real incentive to look for max mana in anything. We're going to use this one here for max mana, and we're going to put it maybe in support, but generally speaking, you wouldn't care for it because you can play around. You can play around your mana a lot better, especially with drops of ether. So let's actually leave it in the D category because we don't want it. And it's the same for physical defense, and I believe magic defense is in here as well. So we can find that one. Yeah, magic defense. Get rid of those 2 as well. They don't have any benefits really to rolling them. The considerations that you can get from other effects and stats completely outweigh that in a defensive term as well. And then we have roly-poly, and roly-poly, what it does is it increases your endurance by anywhere between 100 and 160 for 4 seconds after using spacebar to get up. Icky, oh baby, are you cold? You're cold. All right, it's freezing cold here. All right, so roly-poly, we're going to put it in D, and we don't care about that at all. We don't care about increasing your endurance for 4 seconds after standing up. It's such a niche quality of life thing that a scenario that it might pay out in is just going to be so small and so unlikely that you'll probably never find a real valid use for it. You're more likely to get better value from something like Crisis Evasion. Okay, let's talk about Rush. Rush increases your agility and patience, which I'm assuming refers to swiftness and, I don't know, expertise maybe, for 4 seconds after using a spacebar to dodge or dash. And Again, that's a D tier. We don't care about that. That's trash. We can get rid of that. No real value in that at all. Bear in mind, these might translate to something different. And I'll try and find a different version of the translations as well, just in case somewhere like Maxroll have already pulled the information from it. And then Smash. So Smash increases your specialization and I think your domination. It says subdue here by 50 to 80 for 4 seconds after you get a critical hit. And again, that's not useful at all. We can say that we don't want that in any of our builds. And I've just got a crappy logo here that says Smash. So we're just going to pull that one in, and it's definitely a D tier. You don't want it at all. Then we have Strike, which increases your proficiency, which I'm going to say is specialization, by 100 to 160 for 4 seconds after using a basic attack. So that sounds like, unless it has an internal cooldown, that it could have a full uptime. And I don't think it's going to, but even if it did, it wouldn't be useful at all. I would argue that, and we're going to use this specialization icon here from the pet. We're going to argue that it's not useful at all here. I'm going to put it in the D slot. Mana recovery. There's one for mana recovery, which is 20% chance to recover a flat amount, not a percentage of your mana, 125 to 175 mana when using a skill that consumes mana. Again, even if there isn't a cooldown on this, I don't think it's worth running over the stats that you can get and the best in slot kind of support ones that you could get, even if you were thinking of it for support. So I'm going to say that if we're talking about mana, we don't care about this, and I'm going to use the mana icon from pets here for mana recovery, and I'm going to say it's a D tier. I don't think it has any real value here. And then we have Quick Attack. Quick Attack is when you're hit by a monster, you have a 7 to 12% chance to acquire a Quick Attack effect for 8 seconds. And what Quick Attack does is it increases your weapon attack by 1,000, increases your attack speed by 2%, and your movement speed by 2%. So it's not bad, right? It's considering it can roll on the initial drop of the item, it's not terrible. I would say though that 1,000 weapon attack, not huge, and your attack speed and movement speed of 2%, most classes won't notice that. A lot of classes are already capped on those stats if they're playing with a support with Yearning or they're running a Swift build. So 2%, just not that useful really. I'm going to use this icon for Quick Attack, and we're going to put it in the C slot, okay, because it could have some potential, but I don't think it's really going to be worth you rolling it. 100 weapon attack isn't a lot. Actually, you know what? Put it in the B tier because you could stick with it. Increases weapon attack is an investment one. Investment increases weapon attack by a flat number, so 1,300 to 2,200 for 8 seconds when using a battle item. Now, the odds of you using a battle item, especially on cooldowns, even if you're a support, you're not using them. That you have a limit on how many you can carry as well, right? So I'm going to say investment here with battle items, not that useful. This one is suitable for it because it's a picture of a potion with an up. Okay, we'll see a C tier at best for investment. Now reverse. This one is a funny one. Reverse is if you're attacked whilst you're under. I think it's anywhere from 10 to 20% HP. It causes your health to flip to the other side of that. So, for example, if you know Clown Raid, he puts the curse on you in phase 3, where your health flips at the end of the timer, and you have to try and get your health low so that it flips over to the high side. This is the same with this one, right? So, I'm not sure if you were to potion during this, if it would screw you over. So say you proc this, and you then potion, and then after 10 seconds your health flips down to the other side of it. It would actually be very detrimental. I'm not a fan of it at all, and I'm going to say that this is an absolute D tier, and you should avoid this one at all costs. It's basically a Frankenstein amalgamation of Crisis Evasion and the Curse from Clown, because it has a huge... I want to say a 15-minute or 15 minute cooldown. We're just going to use this icon here for the reverse, and we're going to put it in D tier because it is not a nice thing to have on an item. I think it's going to screw you over if it can flip back down to lower health. Okay. All right, and the next one we have Hello, Ricky. You okay? So the next one we have is counter, and that increases your weapon attack. You okay? You cold? Yeah. All right. We'll have smuggles. Increases your weapon attack by 1300 to 2200 for 8 seconds after you use an awakening skill. And this is called counter, at least in the translation. So increases your weapon attack after using an awakening skill for 8 seconds. Even if it was a high amount, I would say it's not worth it. We're just going to use an example of an awakening skill here, and we'll say it's a D tier because it's not a high amount of weapon attack, and it's only for 8 seconds every 4 minutes. So not huge. Right, and then we have star. What star does is it increases damage dealt to enemies that are seed rank or below by anywhere between 2 and 7%. Okay. And it does say it's reduced against enemies above level 60. Right now, there's nothing in the game that's over level 60, so it works fully as it says. Between 2 and 7% against seed rank or lower. There's no real use for this in the game at the moment. You wouldn't want that, and we're just going to use an icon of a lesser enemy here. Okay, so recover, we're going to use this icon here, and what this one does is it restores anywhere between 40 and 65 vitality per second during battle, so it's an ongoing heal over time kind of thing. Just your natural recovery gets increased essentially. It's D tier by far, absolutely D tier. And then we have regeneration, which is something similar. So what it does is it restores between 80 and 130 vitality every second for 20 seconds after using spacebar to get up. So after you get your standing animation, you have 20 seconds of increased just normal combat recovery. It's awful. Not good at all. You lying down? All right, you can lie down on me. You silly boy.
He's a baby. You're a little baby.
Good boy. And then we have emergency blood transfusion, which is when hit by a monster while under 50% HP, there's a 30% chance to recover anywhere between 8,000 to 13,000 vitality, and that has a 2-minute cooldown. Again, I don't think this really has any value, so I'm just going to put that in D tier as well. This icon here for a blood transfusion. Emergency measures. All right, so this is one of the last ones here for the original rolls. When falling under 30% HP, you get an effect that increases vitality recovery of battle items by 4,000 to 6,500 for 5 seconds. So if you're running Cursed Doll on top of that, it's no bueno. So again, that's pretty trash, and we're going to put that in D tier as well. We'll just use that one for emergency measures. It's, yeah, not great, but there's not much more we have to use. The last stat that we have that can roll on the original drops is Encore. Now, there is a 12, 16, or 20% chance that recovery battle items will be activated an additional time when used. Okay, so recovery only battle items. So there's a chance, 12 to 20% chance that a recovery item gets used twice when it's used. Okay, it doesn't say anything about an internal cooldown, but even then, garbage. So we're just going to use the drops of ether icon here, and that is trash. Okay, so that is everything that can roll on the original dropped lines, traits, whatever you want to call it, in game. And these can also still come when you're rolling silver for them. It's worth noting, but this is how the kind of rating system for them goes. Okay, as you can see, most of them really not good, and the odds of you rolling something good are not in your favor. So just bear that in mind. I'm going to move that one down here actually. Just bear that in mind that these are essentially my takes on okay, so that if you want to screenshot that, that's before you start to roll the special effects that can only come from rolling. Okay, so everything I'm going to go on to from now onwards is only available in the pool of rolls when you're rolling for silver. All right, and let's start with Spike. So Spike is one of my favorites, and essentially what Spike does is when you're attacking a monster, you get an effect called Spike, which lasts for 8 seconds, and it stacks up each time and becomes something stronger called Steel Spike. And what Spike does is it increases your damage by 0.3, 0.35, or 0.45 percentage, and it stacks up to 4 times total. where it also then becomes Steel Spike, and it doubles. So essentially, you get, if you had the highest roll of it, for example, which is 0.45, and you got 4 stacks of it, okay, so that comes 1.8%, and then that can double to 3.6% damage, just pure damage, which is a multiplicative number, which is fantastic, and that is an S tier roll for sure. Okay, so S tier by far and away. We're just going to use this icon here, and that is an S tier for DPS. Okay, absolute god S tier. You need it on your DPS rolls in a god roll. Okay, absolutely need it. And whilst we're talking about Spike and Steel Spike, bear in mind they might change their names. We have another one called Hammer, and what Hammer does is, when attacking a monster, you acquire the Hammer effect for 8 seconds, okay? And what that does is it increases your critical hit damage by 6, 8, or 10%. And the best part about that is, if you also have the Steel Spike effect active, which is when you have all the stacks, what it does is it doubles the effectiveness of Hammer, your 3.6% damage. You could then, on top of that, could also have Hammer going, which then becomes a better version of Hammer, so it could double its critical hit damage to 20%, which is huge. Isn't it, Iggy? Absolutely huge. Yes, it is. So it's 20% crit damage, and if you have one of those rolls, you really, really want to have another one to go with it, because they're a symbiotic pair, that because they double the effectiveness of them. Having one without the other is kind of losing your potential god roll. Okay, and we're just going to use this Hammer icon here for Hammer. Bear in mind it might change its name. Both S tier, both fantastic to look for. You need them as a DPS for a potential best in slot roll or a really, really good settle roll. Okay, and then the next one we move on to is something called Cycle. Now, Cycle, in my opinion, is another fantastic one, and you absolutely need this one when you're hunting a god roll. Okay, I know I'm saying you need these ones already, and we're already looking at 5 of them, but there's more than one quote-unquote best in, like, god roll, if you will. God roll to me is something that ticks every single box for you, really high in its value, and it doesn't necessarily have to do the absolute min-max. You might get a mid-roll on your Spike and a high roll on your Hammer. Okay, that's ridiculously good RNG. You don't want to hunt for a high roll on both, as well as a high roll in, say, crit and your high roll in spec. The odds of that are just so marginally slim that it's not worth your time, unless you have nothing else to do but spend real-life money or gold. So Cycle, anyway. So we're on to Cycle, which is, when attacking a monster, you acquire the Cycle effect for 30 seconds, and it's not renewable, okay, so, until it expires, so it doesn't overlap with itself, it doesn't reactivate itself during its time, like a lot of kind of damage over time things might do. So this one you will have maybe a small window where it's not active, but it doesn't have an internal cooldown as far as I know, so hypothetically it could be down for like 0.1 second and you got it back up again. So what this one does is it increases your skill damage, so everything but your auto attack, by 2.5, 3, or 3.5% for 10 seconds. Okay, and then after that 10 seconds, it then changes to the critical hit chance. So it's then 4, 5, or 6% for 10 seconds, and then another 10 seconds, it increases your critical damage or critical hit damage by 6, 8, or 10% for 10 seconds. Okay, so effectively what you're doing is you're proccing it. It's active for 30 seconds. First 10 seconds, skill damage. Second 10 seconds, crit chance. Third 10 seconds, crit damage. Okay, and then it's going to expire, and you have to re-proc it again, but there's no internal cooldown. This is incredibly good for, I would argue, every DPS. Is an absolute S tier here, and we're going to use this icon here for Cycle, and we're going to put it in S tier. So absolutely hunt for that one as well in DPS. Okay, then moving on to the next one, we've got one called Cold. Okay, and Cold is when attacking a monster while your HP is below 80%, so anything from 0 to 80, you acquire a Cold effect for 3 seconds, okay? And what Cold does is it increases the damage to a monster by 2.5, 3, or 3.5%. And it's that simple. There's nothing else to it, okay? So just having your health under 80% means that you're going to have this effect active all the time. There's no internal cooldown to it. So let's say, for example, you're using Atropenes in fights. Every time you proc an Atropine, it's going to proc cold on top of it, because that's going to take you below the 80%. So the synergy it has with atropine, huge, fantastic. Say you're a Mayhem Berserker already, instantly procced all the time, huge, fantastic value. You can't go wrong with it. It's... Oh, we have an important proc, let's ignore that. So the value you get from cold, fantastic. Now I would say it has a good value, okay? So we're going to put cold in A because it's a really, really good value, but if you're a class that either uses shields or you're most of the time you're sitting fully healed or topped up as best as possible, this encourages you to lose health. And it's not great in some scenarios, especially classes that are very, very squishy, have low effective HP, EHP, your armor coefficients are low, you don't want to be taking damage, or maybe you're someone like a gun lancer who uses shields a lot, or a destroyer who uses shields a lot. It's not S tier for those kind of people. So we're going to put it in A for now, and I'll tell you why coming up. And that's because the next one I want to talk about is something called Constant. And Constant, what this does is, when attacking a monster while your HP is over 40%, this time, you acquire the Constant effect. And Constant increases your damage to monsters by 2.5, 3, or 3.5%, again, the same as Cold, but this time it's from the adverse side of it, so it's from 40% upwards in HP. So it's good for pretty much every class except maybe someone like a Mayhem Berserker, where you're probably never going to see it. We'll use this one here for Constant, okay? And the reason that both of them aren't in S tier is because the effect from both of them increases when you pair them together by 1%. So hypothetically, if you had both, it has the potential to be an S tier, but the problem is that to have both active at the same time, you would need to be a class that A, sits over 40%, so Mayhem Zerkers, you're out the window already, and then B, you have to sit under 80%, so it encourages you to not have full health. So what you would need to do is you need to roll both of them, and then what that would do is if you had the perfect roll for both of them, and you procced both of them, so you're over 40, but you're under 80, so you only have a 40% window of efficiency and health, it's going to give you, hypothetically, 7% increased damage, plus an additional 2% because you're gaining 1% of each one of them from having both active. So it gives you 9% increased damage, which is huge, 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 huge. And that, in my opinion, is S tier, but the requirements to make it active are not S tier, okay? And to be honest, most of a fight, especially fights that you're learning mechanics on, or you're very comfortable with, or fights that the mechanics are one-shots, you're not going to be wanting to take damage, and you're going to be wanting to heal and top up, and your party are going to keep you alive with supports. So you're not going to have both of these active. Cold you might have active on its own all the time, you're a Mayhem Berserker for example, or Constant you might have active all the time if you're a good DPS that sits at full health, okay? But the odds of you having both of them together, in my opinion, are very slim. And if you're someone that plays around both of them together, absolutely S tier. If you can master sitting at 80% or below health, but staying over 40% all the time, then this is a perfect combination. 9% flat damage boost, huge across the board, and you would want to look for both those together. But one of them on their own is already losing out on potential 2% damage buff on top of their perks. So you would need them both to roll high and both to roll together, and also you'd need to play around things like atropine. Are there mechanics in a fight that you can lower your health with, like a burn or a dot, or stuff you can stand in, or just if you're a front attacker like a destroyer, for example, or a gun lancer, you could intentionally not heal and lower your health to 80% and below, and just make sure that you didn't heal unless obviously your supports heal you, and then you'd have to lose health again. So that's why it's not S tier. It's my opinion that it's an A for now. All right, and then we move on to something called Dagger. Dagger is one that's for supports. So we've got a little support bracket at the bottom here. And what we want to say is supports, there's a few roles that are absolutely incremental to you, okay? And I will put, like I said before, Spec and Swift are actually in there for you as well. But but I can't for some reason add it in twice. So don't worry about that. If you're a support, spec is absolutely great for you. Swiftness is absolutely great for you, and vitality and HP not terrible for you as well. Okay, there's definitely a place for it in your build. But let's move on to Dagger. So Dagger, what it does is when you attack a monster, you apply a Dagger debuff to the enemy. Hello. Good boy. And what that does is it reduces the target's defense by 1.5, 1.8, or 2.1%. So it's a defense down similar to like a Summoner or a Reaper or a Gun Lancer or a Destroyer. They do a 12% down, which is effectively a 6% damage increase against that target. So you could view this just by halving the defense down. That's kind of the damage buff that you give your team against that enemy. Say you rolled a 2.1 defense down Dagger. What that does is just a permanent 1% increased damage against that target, and it's for the entire raid. Okay, so it's not a party-specific debuff like everything else in the groups do. So a party synergy is normally just for that party. A Dagger here is for everyone. Okay, so very, very valuable because it effectively doubles its efficiency by only needing one support to run this, or maybe even a Gun Lancer in a team could run it if you had no support. So Dagger is absolutely an S tier role, but specifically for supports. Okay, and let me find the defense down icon here. That is an S tier support item. Okay, this is Dagger. And then we have another one here, which is Enlightenment, they call this one. And what this is, this lasts for 8 seconds as well. And it increases your identity gauge acquisition, your generation of your identity, by 3 to 5%. Okay, when attacking a monster for 8 seconds, it's active and it doesn't have an internal cooldown. So effectively, this could be permanent. And you could have 5% permanent generation of specialization meter, your identity meter. And I would say this is up there for supports. It's probably an A tier. And it's probably B tier for DPS early on, kind of like a budget. Maybe C tier as well. So I'm going to put it in support and say it's okay to look for it support, but it's not a heavy focus for support. There are definitely other options that you should focus on, and I'll get into why a little bit later. And then we have, when applying a supportive shield, so shield, HP recovery, or damage reduction to an ally, additionally apply the cheering effect to them for 5 seconds. Okay, and cheering, what it does is it increases the damage that person does to monsters by, depending on your role, 0.7, 0.9, or 1.1%. So effectively, if you're, say, Paladin, you're popping Holy Protection on your party, that party instantly then gets that damage buff of 1% on 1.1%, say, on top of everything else to something. And let's say you have your identity active, your Holy Aura, your Blessed Aura, have that active. That's another permanent 1.1% damage on top of everything else. S tier for supports, absolutely S tier for supports. Everything we can really do to increase our group's damage, huge. So yeah, we're absolutely going to call that S tier, and that's going to be the icon we use for cheering. Okay, so absolutely S tier. I can't see a reason why it wouldn't be for a support when you want to focus for that. Even the lower rolls of it still really, really good because it's 3 people at least that you're buffing, right? Their damage against a target, so you can times the effectiveness by 3 essentially. All right, and then we have Elementary. Elementary is when attacking a monster, there's a 3% chance to gain the effect of Elementary, and what that does is it increases your weapon attack by 220 to 160, so the low end would be 160, and that can stack 10 times, so you could effectively have 1600 weapon power or 2200 weapon power for 60 seconds. And it doesn't say there's an internal cooldown, so you can pretty much keep it up 100%. And I would say at best this is like a C, a B to a C on DPS side. I wouldn't really class it any higher than that. And we're gonna find an icon for Elementary here. All right, so this is Elementary, and we're gonna put it in C tier, in my opinion. Okay, and then we have the next one. We have one called Reward, and what that is when scoring a critical hit against a monster, you acquire the effect, and when you acquire 8, 7, or 6 stacks of this, depending on your role, it's removed and a powerful attack is inflicted. Hello. I know. He's a good boy. You right? What's up? What's up? What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, yeah. Do you like reward or not? What do you think of reward? What do you think? What do you think? Do you like it or not? Iggy says that we don't know what that damage number is for reward. So as it stands right now, we can't actually put it in a high value tier list. So right now, elementary, I'm going to say, reward, I'm going to say, it sits pretty low in terms of its priority on the tier list because we don't know what that number is. And odds are, if it's anything like gravity trainings, lightning bolts in its identity, or say you're running the betrayal set, it's not efficient to run that over another thing. So right now we'll say reward, not that effective, considering that you need to build up the stacks as well. So we're going to put that in D tier because we don't know what the value is for it as well. All right, and we're going to use this icon here for that, for reward. Okay, and the next one we have is just a flat weapon attack boost by 1300 to 1900. And I would say that this, I'd probably put this in C tier because we don't really see how well that scales. So yeah, C tier for that. It's pretty simple. And then we have, what are you doing? Can't settle for some reason when I'm recording. We have superiority, which is the next one, and that increases damage to monsters by 1.5, 2, or 2.5%, just flat, okay? Just flat damage buff. And I would say this has the potential to be S tier because there's no requirements around it at all. Fantastic opportunity. But you could argue there's a place for it in A tier because S tier, I really want you to be hunting just the god rolls at most, okay? And A tier would be what I would call a god roll that isn't min-maxed, okay? So you're looking at stuff that's really increasing your damage, and you could pair that with other ones of a similar note, which I'm going to talk about as well. So superiority, we will put it in the A tier for now. And then we have an assault. Assault, what that does is it increases your crit damage to monsters by 4, 6, or 8%. So we have some other crit damage stuff like I talk about with hammer. Hammer being incredibly valuable. This is like a weaker version of it with no incentive or opportunity to be doubled or increase its value. So assault, we're going to leave at A tier for now. Okay, and we will use this icon for assault. And then lastly, of those three that we want to talk about is something called jungle. Jungle is increases your crit hit chance to monsters by 2, 3, or 4%. Now these three, as you can see, there's kind of a trend going on here. We have damage, and crit chance. They're very flat base, no requirements to set up, just straight to go out the gate ready boosts, okay? And they're all really fantastic. They're just a little bit low on the end of what they offer compared to some of the synergy you can get from the best ones. So I'm going to leave them in A for now. All right, and then moving on to, we're coming to the end of this now. So when scoring a critical hit against a monster, there's a 2, 3, or 5% chance to increase critical damage by 100% for that attack. Okay, and that doesn't apply to awakening skills. Hey, come here. What are you doing? It's off. All right. Okay, so we have what I would consider to be pretty lackluster. I would probably want to put this in D, but I mean, it doesn't say there's any internal cooldown for it, so there's a chance effectively. Until we know what that chance of proccing is, it's hard to really value it. But because we don't know that value, the odds of you getting an extra crit, 100% crit damage on top of everything else, it could be every other chance. It could be 50%, I don't know. But it doesn't seem popular in the Korean bracelet rolls, at least on the API for lower. So it's hard to say that it's good. So for now, I'm going to put it in C tier, just because we don't know its real value coming into it. So we're going to put that in C tier for now. Okay, so the next one is, in my opinion, a huge one. It's called Vulnerability, and what it does essentially is when a landing attack, it decreases the crit the target's crit resistance. So you might see crit resistance on some of skills for like the martial artists, and what that means is it increases your crit chance against that target. So instead of buffing your crit chance, it decreases the enemy's resistance to crit. So they're 10% more susceptible to you critting them. In this case, the chance is 1.8, 2.1 or 2.5%, and this is something for a support that is absolutely S tier. You run this on top of the dagger effect, like I mentioned before, which is a defense down that we have over here, and it is like a perfect combination, right? You're increasing damage done and crit chance against that person. So huge combination. They don't benefit from each other, but just having them both on together is god roll for a support. So you absolutely want that. And I think it affects the entire raid, or the not just the party. So again, the synergy of it is essentially doubled more than doubled what it would be from just being a party. So absolutely chase that down. If you're a support, you want dagger and vulnerability, because together they're just perfect combination. Okay, and then we're looking at the last three. So in my opinion, we have some of the best ones here. So ambush increases back attack damage by 2.5, 3 or 3.5%. No requirements to it whatsoever, except that you do back attack damage. And most DPS here are back attackers. So I would say if you're a back attack DPS, it is a guaranteed S tier for you. That is ambush. Okay, and ambush, in my opinion, absolutely an S tier. You can't really go wrong with that. It's 3.5% flat damage boost if you're a back attacker. Okay, then we have duel. Duel is the same as the ambush, but it's for front attackers. So if you're a front attacking class, it is an absolute S tier again. So if you're a gun lancer or a destroyer, then you are laughing, because this is perfect. All right, then moving on to the last one. And this last one's called accumulate. And what this does is, when you attack with a basic attack, so just your clicking attacks, not your auto attacks, but your clicking attacks, you acquire this accumulate effect for 60 seconds, and this effect stacks 10 times. And when it stacks 10 times, it acquires the expire effect for 3 seconds. And what the expire effect does is increases your crit damage of skills, except for the awakening skill, for those 3 seconds. And it's 20, 30 or 40% depending on the roll. And it has a 2-minute internal cooldown after it's procced. So it's essentially similar to like Magic Stream or Adrenaline. You know, you build up these stacks, and when you hit 10 stacks of accumulate, it then for 3 seconds you have this buff called expire, and you're going to have a 40% potential crit damage buff on every single attack you do. And 10 click attacks, depending on your class, could be very, very quick. It could be very, very slow. Like the destroyer, 10 click attacks is going to take me a long, long time. But if I think about like a swift war dancer, 10 attacks is, you know, it's ridiculously quick. It's a couple of seconds, right? Because your basic attack cancelling as well in between all your abilities. So at all times you're getting in these click attacks, and you're probably having it on its cooldown all the time, which is the 2 minutes cooldown. I would say because of its 2-minute cooldown, having 40% crit damage every 2 minutes is not huge, considering some fights are only going to let you proc that like 3 or 4 times. So I would say this is like a C to B tier at most. I wouldn't go any higher than that, personally. So this is accumulate, and it's a crit damage one, so in the C tier. In the B tier, sorry, we should say. Okay, and that is all of the bracelet stats that we know that can roll. Now there was a screen. I'll put a timestamp in for you now, so you can see to go back to the first set of rolls that can roll on the drop of the item, so you know what to hunt for. But essentially, what we're saying is the absolute best rolls you can hunt for are 2 of the combat stats. So most people will probably play a crit spec build. It's very, very popular to play burst builds as opposed to piano. But if you're playing a burst or piano spec, you essentially want 2 out of these 3 on your roll. Okay, and then when you start to identify the item, you want something like spike, and hammer, or cycle, or ambush, or duel. Or, I mean, hypothetically, you could have in a best in slot, you could have, if you're a crit spec build, you could have crit, spec, both rolling really high, up to 100, and then you could have spike and hammer, and that would be, I believe, the best roll that you could possibly have. You could argue that you could have something like cycle and ambush, or so. Aim for one of these two lines here, so S and A. They're absolutely worth your time. In my opinion, always hunt for double stat rolls. So if you get, say, something like your main stat plus your main combat stat, so maybe your specialization class gets spec and say your dexterity gets spec and dexterity, and then maybe you're going to get something like ambush and assault. You know, that is a phenomenal roll, and the odds of you hitting that roll in the first place are very, very small. And on top of that, the odds of you rolling the stats that you roll as well are going to be much bigger. So, I mean, even if they roll medium, you know, like mid rolls on like your main stat and your spec, it's still a tremendously rare roll. Don't go chasing god rolls because it's going to cost you a fortune. You know, some of the bigger streamers in Korea have spent millions, literally millions of gold chasing god roll bracelets and ended up with, you know, like a, I don't know, like a budget kind of settle roll. Like I've got like a tier list of how I categorize them. Something that has huge room for improvement still, but is decent, you know, like maybe 10% total damage increased. But yeah, this is just my take on the tier list. You need to know that a big part of your build, but don't go spending all your money on it because it's essentially the same as hunting a 9/7 stone. You know, you have very limited control over it, and there's much better ways to spend your gold in-game investing in your characters. Okay, it should be one of the last things that you ever spend money on in this game. And I know for me, I'm going to get like the most basic ass roll I can get that just does the bare minimum, and I'm going to cash out because bracelets are going to drop from 1490 content for as long as we're here, and at some point I'm going to get one that I'm happy with that just does, I don't know, anywhere between 6 to 10% damage buff, and I can take it through with me to hard modes by upgrading it to ancient. I will say for supports, as you can see, unfortunately supports, you really are screwed here in hunting for a good roll. As you can see, all of these are basically all D tier for you, right? Outside of spec and swift, there's so what, five rolls that you want, 6 rolls that you want out of all of these. It just doesn't look good, does it? So supports, I really feel for you. You've got a real mountain to climb to try and find a good bracelet, and it's going to cost you a lot if you really want to roll for them as well. So supports, you have it much worse than everyone else right now. I hope you guys have some good success in getting a good bracelet tomorrow. Onwards, because tomorrow is when it comes. But yeah, this is just my take on the tier lists. Hopefully you guys agree with some of it. Maybe you don't agree with any of it at all. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. Do you categorize stuff the same way I have here, or do you completely disagree? Do you think I'm fucking bonkers for my choices and that I've lost the plot and don't know what I'm talking about? Because I'm sure some of these have more potential than I'm realizing, but I'm just trying to logically work out how efficient they can be for everybody. I could do an individual breakdown for every class, but it would take me forever, right? Because obviously, see this, look at it with a grain of salt, and just think, my class, what does it need? I've got a fundamentals kind of screen grab that I've made, like an infographic on my Twitter. So if you haven't checked out my Twitter already, I'll leave a link in the description below to it. Make sure you go check it out because I'm posting on there kind of all the bracelet information, infographic cheat sheets for builds, and you can kind of look at the fundamentals and think, what are my fundamentals for my class? Okay, so in my example, I do a Death Blow Striker. They are a crit specialization build with a back attack. So I want to chase crit specialization and any DPS stuff that helps me, specifically looking at back attacks as well. So I know crit specialization, spike, hammer, ambush, cycle, and then assault, superiority, and jungle are all really, really good ones for me to look for. So I can just write a small checklist to look for when I'm looking for bracelets, and I know those are the things I need to look for, and I'm good. But yeah, you can do that with any class that you play, and that way you know when you see one instantly, okay, that one's good. That one's not. I won't waste my silver on that one. I won't even roll it because it has no potential. Or I won't go on the auction house and look for 2 stats that are useless or low rolled. Okay, so just knowing more lets you play with better decisions, and that's kind of my thought process when I'm looking for these things. Is just knowing more helps me make better decisions and play better. So I'm all about just kind of getting as much education and knowledge as we can out there and growing together. So that's my take. Thank you very much, guys, and I will see you in the next video.
And remember, guys, if you're new to the channel, please consider dropping a subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I'd really appreciate that. It helps me push the content out to more people. And Iggy would also always appreciate it, wouldn't you, Bubba? You say thank you, and we'll see you in the next one. Oh, you're so shy. You're such a shy baby. You say bye-bye. Bye-bye. See you in the next one. Good boy.